Ready? I'm just like, let's do it. All right, good morning, everyone. How about if we get this started? My name is Susan Barnett. I am the owner of Barnett Communications. It's a small writing and public relations media consultancy firm. I am also a journalist. If you are local, you might know me from WAMC or many years ago from WRGB TV. So I have kind of a journalist perspective on this issue as well as a citizen's perspective on this issue. So our topic is using local sources, New York businesses supporting each other. And our panelists today have various points of view on that and some strategies and some challenges to share. And we are hoping that we can keep this somewhat informal. If you can tell, this is a somewhat informal group. And we would far prefer a discussion if possible. And I know that microphones can be a little bit intimidating. However, I am also told that they are videotaping. And so if I don't come running at you with a microphone, your questions will not be heard. So we're going to play this by ear. If people are not comfortable with a microphone, I can always repeat your question into the microphone, problem solved, and we have a discussion going. So rather than hold all questions to the end, if someone makes a presentation and you have a question, please feel free to ask it. We'd be happy to deal with them as they come up rather than making you hold them till the end. So that being said, our panelists. We have, at the far end of the table, Jason Salfi with Comet Skateboards. And you could tell him by the shoes as he came in. Jason is president and co-founder of Comet Skateboards. He says they moved Comet in 2007 after 10 years to be closer to the supply chain and the material science innovations on the East Coast. He says they work intensively with university and suppliers to get the safest and most durable skateboards on the market. So clearly, there's something to be discussed there about moving closer to your supply sources. Next to him is Thomas Christenfeld, owner of the alleged farm. He told me he wasn't quite sure why he was here, but as I looked at what he wrote to me, we had a flurry of emails the day before this event. He runs a small vegetable farm in southern Washington County. He markets his produce through the Glens Falls Farmers Market and a CSA with various sites around the Capital District. However, he said, given my work, I generally have to go outside the state to get the specialized equipment and supplies I need. There's a challenge that can be discussed. And we can look for answers and opportunities to deal with that because that's something that is not an uncommon problem. Sarah Bishop, next to him, is the executive director of Buffalo First. She came to them from Director of Operations at the Institute on Religion and Public Policy in Washington, D.C., which is an international nonprofit organization working globally to promote human rights, specifically religious freedom. At Buffalo First, their goal is to create a strategic position in the community as a keystone educator and active promoter of business-to-business support and local sourcing. So clearly a fit with this panel. And finally, we have Sam Harrington from Ecovative. And Sam joined the company when it was just a few people in a basement with a crazy idea. They decided that fungi could be used as a packing material. And he helped develop the automated biomanufacturing system that harnesses those living fungi to turn locally sourced agricultural crop waste into eco-cradle protective packaging. As environmental director, he conducted life cycle assessments of the production system to inform engineering decisions and minimize Ecovative environmental footprint. However, he now leads the marketing and sales team, and he's working with several Fortune 500 customers to develop award-winning sustainable packaging solutions. So you've got a panel here who knows their stuff. The question is, as individuals, we are all aware of the growing movement toward buy local. Stop looking for convenience, which has been the model for so many years. Convenience can be local, but if convenience is not local, there is an attempt to educate consumers that there is still a benefit in maybe taking an extra step to stay local. But the question is, how does that work for businesses? It's a very different thing when you are producing anything or selling something, but you need to keep a supply chain that is close enough if you want to be truly local. So I'm going to hand it over, first of all, to Sarah, and she can talk about her experiences.
I appreciate that, and I'm happy to be here in Albany with you. This panel kind of typifies my normal day, so I'm very excited to be with these the entrepreneurial spirit and to be here with you guys. So as you know, not to help the stereotype of Buffalo, but we are the third poorest city in the country. But this I use to our advantage because we intrinsically get that we want to help ourselves. Buffalonians are very pro-Buffalo. They have an extreme pride about their city. I am extremely prideful about my city, and I know Erin is as well. And our entrepreneurs take that very seriously, and when they make choices, they want to help their neighbor. They want to support their own district, where they live, where they work, where they play. They want that piece of art that is from their neighbor, and all that great stuff that makes a local economy flourish. And this isn't just a feel-good. This is really a mechanism for real economic development and growth. And we see it over and over, as you've pointed out. This is not a sense of convenience anymore, but we want to make real choices that affect our quality of life and bring up the public health of our region. And Buffalonians are keenly aware of this. And so the case is made over and over again in studies from Harvard to civic economics. They've spent a lot of time and a lot of money realizing that this is actually occurring, and 3 times the amount of money stays in our local economy when we shop local. And that's very significant, especially for a destitute populace. And we can see this in the impact of the economy in 4 distinct areas. This includes labor costs, which directly inject money right back into our local economy through payments of wages and benefits to the local residents that then pay taxes in turn. Profits, which remain in the community, and that's the multiplier effect that I was discussing earlier, that 3 times the amount of money stays there. Procurement of local goods and services for resale is what we're discussing here, and how we can work together business to business and sourcing our goods locally from farms or whatever it may be. And then also charitable giving is also factored in, and local businesses, I don't know if you know this, but they give up to 120 times the amount of money back into their community. And we see this all the time. We work with local businesses who then, are the ones that are giving to the softball team or that event or to us or to whomever it is. Local businesses are always giving, and rarely do I hear them say no from our small mom and pops, those who usually have the least amongst us. But that's how they care about their community, and this is another way that they actively promote it. And so Buffalo First mission then is, to create a more sustainable, just and local living economy. And we're talking very small scale here. I'm talking about the entrepreneur who, works that 9 to 5 all by himself with maybe one person, or, people think small business and they start at 500, and I say, okay, let's get down to an economy of scale. Let's talk about the 1 or 2 people. Let's talk about the neighbor that I know, and me, going to visit Jim on Elmwood, that kind of feel. And we've positioned ourselves uniquely, I feel, as advocate, educator, and keystone. So in the realm of advocacy, we talk about IDA reform and using taxpayer money for what it really should be spent, not for attracting big employers out of town and producing the big box swindle. Let's give that money to people who really deserve it, who really are creating that economic growth right here and right now. And I can tell you about one that actually, as I was, checking my email this morning, the Buffalo News ran an article of one of our small business owners who we've been talking about, the Canal Side Community Alliance, which we're members of. We've been working really diligently on the waterfront development. And Bass Pro was the anchor tenant. That was the entire plan, was to bring in Bass Pro. And the community spoke out against it. The Canal Side Community Alliance spoke out against it, and we stopped that. $60 million was going to go into a sinkhole, basically. And we made measures that said, hey, instead of doing that, let's make sure that the mechanism is in place and the policies are in place, that 50% have to be small businesses. They have to be local and independently owned, and they belong on our waterfront. And so she made the case today that the anchor tenant should really be local business, and I agree. And I think that's really simple, but you know, we still need to put the policies in place and have the watchdogs there to make sure that that happens. Another place that we've advocated for is, you know, like I said, IDA reform attached to businesses that do social and environmentally conscious. They harness the power of business for these methodologies, for good, basically. And this past year, we, along with David Levine up there at the top, hello sir, we advocated for benefits corporations, and it passed unanimously through the legislature. Now, if Governor Cuomo would sign that piece of paper and make it, you know, put that in the law, we'd be more than happy, and I think Albany is a great place for me to make that pitch. And lastly, you know, we are, the last campaign that I wanted to speak of is, right now we're entrenched in a holiday fury. Obviously, everyone wants to go to Black Friday. We support Small Business Saturday, but in a very grassroots, not Amex way. And so our campaign in Buffalo is called Give Local a Chance, and we connect all the districts and what they're doing for the holidays. Starting with Elmwood had a boutique crawl. In South Buffalo, you can go see, you know, Irish music and be in a park, see your friends, see Santa sightings, all that good stuff. And this Thursday, Grand Ferry is what I'm calling the new Buffalo. It's made of the old immigrant population and new refugee population. And it's melding that together, and that is a new Buffalo, is refugee populations and good stuff like that. As far as educating, you know, we fulfill quite the gamut. We go from the small business owner who still gets their morning coffee at Starbucks, and much to my detriment, to business owners who completely understand and source locally and would not think of doing otherwise. And they believe in sustainability so hardcore that, you know, they won't talk to any farmers that do not have another generation behind them, because they know that that relationship will peter out. And this gives us, when we think of local sourcing, you know, this is a great thing, because now they've taken control of their economic wealth, and the fact that they've set a price point with the relationship that they have with that farmer by saying that we're going to do $7 a bundle for wheat, no matter what the global economy says. So now you have a sustainable, and the product is produced, it goes to the consumer at the same price, it goes to the farmer at the same price, it goes to the bakery at the same price. And that's a great thing. And we also do a whole slew of, you know, monthly business-to-business mixers, our local coupon book, our online directory, business-to-business trade shows, coffee hours where entrepreneurs can discuss their needs and wants, and all this to build a local economy that functions properly and in relationship with one another. And we have you know, we even do a lecture series called Teaching by Example, where we take the best of the best in Buffalo and sit them in front of, you know, the public and say, you know, this is what a sustainable, just, equitable business looks like. Now let's aim towards it, and let's provide incentives that give to the good, not, you know, the other way around. And then lastly, I was going to say that we are Keystone, and so our network is comprised of 130 businesses, 25 nonprofits, and over 200 individuals. So if Buffalo First doesn't do it, we know someone that does. So in the local food network, we know, you know, this farmer, we know this business owner, but we know Edible Buffalo and Field the Fork who can make that happen. And we will gladly outsource to be able to produce a more healthy, vibrant economy. And I'm probably out of time, and I'm sorry I spoke very long. Thanks.
I have a question for you almost immediately.
Sure.
Had there been any studies done indicating the value of public support for local businesses versus the large, you know, like the pro-BAFs?
Have there been? Yeah, and both by Civic Economics Harvard, they've done like, and I mean, there's been countless reports that are kind of like the overarching, but actually we have a public accountability initiative locally, and Kevin Connors heads that, and he did specifically Bass Pro and what they've done in other locales to basically make the case against them, and that was a piece that basically broke down and changed the whole public opinion and elected officials' mind on the entire project, so yes.
Okay. Is there anybody here who has any immediate questions for Sarah? Yes.
Instead of question, I'm going to add to that. Actually, Hometown Advantage is a website.
Okay, I think I need a microphone.
They also have studies that show that you can find advantage that the preponderance of local businesses in your region result in a higher paying wage. The website, I think the website is called Hometown Advantage. Stacy Mitchell, Big Box Swindle, there you go.
So the New Rules Project.
Right, there's a study, and I can't name the university right now, that shows that when you have more local businesses in your region, that it will result in higher page, overall higher wages for local.
And Harvard also just released in their review saying that economic development is comprised of many clusters of small businesses instead of a few large corporations.
All right, so what I would also like to know, for the benefit of the panel, is we'd like to know who you are. Kind of give us an idea of where you come from, so maybe we know what it is you'd like to hear. So first of all, how many of you are government representatives? Okay, so that gives you some information.
Wow.
Anybody from private companies? Nonprofits? Okay, did I miss anybody? Any other organization or, yes?
Carleton University in Ottawa.
Carleton University in Ottawa. Okay, thank you. So that kind of gives us a sense of what you might be interested in. Our next speaker is Jason Salvi from Comet Skateboards, who said he had something to bounce right off of what Sarah had to say.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for making all those points. I had the benefit of watching the Bali network emerge from Philadelphia to what it has become in California, to spread wildly across, and have known many of the people who are part of the organization nationwide for many years, and I'm really happy to say that they're doing great work, and a lot of the tenets which we operate by come from many of the things that were discovered over the many years of research that Judy Wicks and her colleagues brought forth. So first of all, I just want to say that I am an entrepreneur. I'm very happy to say that capitalism can work, but I'm also at the same time very attuned to the fact that business needs to give more to our general community. I was just down in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I don't know if anybody has ever been to Brazil, but it's one of the largest disparities of wealth in the world is there. And I was really struck by the fact that many of the wealthy neighborhoods were fenced in. That to me signified an enormous disparity in what could be a very happy situation. And unless business really focuses keenly on giving to the whole society, we could end up in a very, very scary situation. So Comet Skateboards, to contribute to a more just and prosperous and green world, we are a founding B Corporation. We are actually starting another company with a California company, and this new company that we founded in premise at this moment, we're waiting to register to see who passes benefit legislation first. So it's either going to be registered in New York or it's going to be registered in California. So I do urge Governor Cuomo to sign that legislation because I can prove that we've moved once and be happy to move a business again. Of course, we're going to stay rooted in New York with our manufacturing. We're really happy here. We love what we're doing and the people we're working with, but I want to say making decisions towards benefiting communities can make a huge economic benefit to this state happen. So a couple key initiatives that I'll just discuss really briefly and allow the other panelists to speak, and hopefully we can get an open discussion going, are A, we use local banks, and we've benefited from a loan from the Tompkins County Area Development, which in 1 year allowed us to create 2.5 jobs, and over the next couple of years, far exceeding what their expectation was, we should add about 2 or 3 more. And I will say that small business is not in business to create jobs, but when we grow, we do, obviously. So the more incentives that the state can put into place to allow small banks to make more loans to small businesses that give back to the community, the better. And a key statistic to note is that local banks contribute 50% of the small business loans to small businesses, while big banks contribute about 18%. Big banks control about 58% of bank assets out there. Small banks control less than a quarter. So you see a large potential if the state were to support local banks and local credit unions to support local business, and incentivize more agencies like Sarah's to educate the public about shopping at those local businesses that are supported by local banks. And 75% more tax money can be generated locally and at the state level if we start to operate that way. So the multiplier effect that she is talking about is very real and can have a huge impact on the state's budget. So that's one thing that Comet is very devoted to, and we consider ourselves, we distribute our skateboards globally. So that's a key distinguishing fact. I think a lot of people wonder, hey, what's a local business? And so there's probably a number of definitions by which you could define a local business. We sometimes, the simple way that I like to define that is to say, we're headquartered in one spot. We give to that community. As we grow, we see ourselves perhaps being in more locations, but each of those businesses would operate in a way that would continue to contribute to the principles of a local living economy. And real quickly, I just wanted to also state a couple of brief metrics. We did move from California to our manufacturing in New York State because most of the materials that we're using came from east of the Mississippi. So bring the molehill to the mountain, so to speak. So since moving, we've probably saved, in the last actually year and a half, we've probably saved $19,000 in fuel charges from trucking. That's a real savings that's gone into the local central New York economy because we've been able to grow substantially as a business. We moved to New York State to work with actually a researcher, Dr. Neil Netravalli, who was speaking here earlier today, came up with a technology that turned into a startup called HE2 Materials. We work closely with HE2 Materials to bring their biocomposite technology into our skateboards. We're working with another researcher up in Vermont to make another adhesive, and the more incentives that can be put in place for small business to grow a manufacturing base that's agriculturally founded, we see this enormous multiplier effect happening once again because of the enormous agricultural potentials of the state on many levels. So lastly, I'll just close with as we move forward and consider the choices to support local versus multinational larger businesses, the larger businesses that I mentioned, I can't say I've got a chip on my shoulder against them, and that all I'm saying is they don't need the help. Okay. They're doing just fine without it. It's the local businesses that are creating the jobs. It's the local businesses that are trying to take care of the local community, and that's who needs help. And we really need to watch out for that sort of desert and oasis kind of scenario that can arise by supporting large multinationals. And there is a place for them, and there's a place for local business, and I hope that the state can, by and large, start to see the benefit of supporting local. Thank you.
Can you kind of walk us through your thinking process as you decided to move? That's a large decision.
It was a large decision. It was an exciting time to consider moving our business. What really went into it was was wanting to be right in the thick of the research that was going on that we knew that would push to the next level that we could push to the next level of skateboard manufacturing. I mean, we're not going to see, tangible results in the marketplace for some of the research that we're doing for a couple of years even, but we know that because we're here and because we're working with the people that we're working with, we're going to have the ability to see Comet as not just a 5, 10, 15-year business that does its thing in a flashy, trendy industry, but it's something that we could see lasting for 100 years, 300 years, whatever, and morph as the leader that we have been in our own industry, and as a leader to educate young people about making wise decisions with their money.
Did California try to court you to stay?
No, I mean we were so small. I mean we were so small, and it just it wasn't even a blip on the radar. I'm sure. I mean, it wasn't like we said, "Hey, we're going to leave unless."
Right.
But it was just we're a small, nimble company. We were able to pack everything into an 18-wheeler and get ourselves out here.
Yeah, I guess the reason I was asking is we've got government people here. If they had, was there anything they could have done that would have kept you?
Like I said, the best things the things that we'd like to see from the state now is, as we get into more material science innovation, is incentives to do so. We'd like to see more programs to help local businesses access funds to grow their businesses and thus create more jobs, and incentives as well. There's certain buying practices that the state can honor over. So passing benefit corporation legislation and opting towards B corporations for certain things could really help move the dial. And these are real. There's real metrics behind these third-party regulated businesses.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Jason? Go ahead, Jody. I'll repeat it.
Yeah. Actually, you brought up something that's always. She said, "Go ahead."
Well, I didn't know it was going to be a big long
Okay.
question.
Okay. Is that awesome?
I think it's on. Is that on? All right. You brought up something I've always struggled with supporting local businesses. It's support local businesses. I totally get it. And yet at the same time, success in the business realm is marketing your product all over the world, and also selling it online so that it's easy for people to access. So you mentioned that what makes a local business is a business that where it is quartered or where its main offices are, supports the local economy where that office is located. Is there some set of criteria that would help me as a consumer to know that I can buy something that's manufactured in Ottawa, if in fact I know that company supports the local economy of Ottawa? Is there some way that I can judge companies like that? Because I want to buy a craft-made object from somewhere else, but I do want to support local businesses at the same time.
Right. I mean, local is a state of mind, so one of the dangers you run into talking about locals is you can bring up this sort of feelings of isolationism or protectionism. So we're not saying to buy only from within your community, but to, when you have the option to do so, and be at a glance, if you're looking at products that you want to make a decision to buy or not, as more third-party bodies come into play, like B Corporation, looking for a seal or a logo that states that this product or company has been vetted by a third party for their business practices. So that's probably the most key thing. There's several third party organizations that are coming online now that, but as we Comet grow, this year for 2012, we'll be putting a B Corporation logo on all the products we sell. We've built a great amount of awareness among skateboarders and people who buy our products about what B Corporations do, and we're seeing a groundswell of interest in it.
And also, I would say for us, there's a criteria, and it's pretty strict as to who can be a member of Buffalo First. So 100% ownership has to be in New York, and then, 50% has to be in New York, and 100% ownership has to be within the Western New York area. And all of that online directory are people that we have, gone through that process, and they've gone through the process of fitting the 4 or 5 criteria that fit our very strict local, ownership matters. And so anyone that would be on our online directory, and many of the local first initiatives have, been combed through and made sure that their ownership resides in that specific area.
You said B Corporation, what is that?
So Benefits Corporation is what he's talking about, and it's B Corp for short.
If you go to bcorporation.net, it's the B, the letter B, and then corporation.net. You can look
Which
up
is
the
birthed out of B Lab, which is a nonprofit in Philadelphia that created benefits corporations, or B Corp certification.
Yes, I don't live in Albany. I don't know much about environmentally, but I'm guessing that it's a non-attainment area under the Clean Air Act, which means that there are certain environmental regulation implications. Do you ever think about that when you decide where to move as a business? What the regulations are in an area?
We're based in Ithaca, New York, but I can give you a really quick anecdote about that. When we made the choice to use water-based low VOC coatings, we were faced with having to get a spray booth, and deal with the Air Quality Control Board and the local fire department. When we gave the materials safety data sheet, the MSDS sheets, to the local organizations we had to deal with, we found out that there was no issue at all and no permit necessary. So that saved us over, I think it was like $14,000 at the time we put our spray booth in. And moving forward, not having to pay fees for the level of VOCs that or buy a permit to release a certain number of volatile organic compounds into the atmosphere every year has saved us an enormous amount of money. It's created workplace safety and solidarity that's unmeasurable, and so absolutely we do consider that thing. But and quickly I'll just say, there's one of the things that we believe in is my background was in natural resources management. I think the business can be a force for proactive natural resources management, and that regulation on the state level, business needs to recognize the limitations of state regulations, and that states should be focusing on egregious polluters, and businesses really need to focus on that proactive natural resources management. I don't want to be ever put in a position where I'm going to be regulated. And I think there's a competitive advantage to saying, like, we operate this way proactively and trying to get others to follow suit. And that's part of our civic duty, to help the state not have to waste money chasing every other person down. So we can push that hard in the marketplace.
I just had a question as far as your marketing, because obviously probably your customer base is a fairly young group, I would imagine, and you're marketing your product as such where you're using less VOC type compounds, all these things, and do you really go? Actually, I'm sorry, I don't know your company before this, but I do love skateboarding, and so the kids can relate to this, and are they? Do you have some sort of way of telling that they are actually saying, hey, this is a sort of a cool company, they're out for the environment and whatnot, and they're buying our product because of that?
We get emails constantly from young people wanting to learn more about us being a B Corporation or the Cradle to Cradle certification that we're going after for 2012. It's amazing. I'd say the big shift happened in 2005, 2006. People really started to care. And this new generation is just off the charts with interest in that level.
That is actually a perfect segue for Sam Harrington, who is part of the new generation and has a very cool company.
So Ecovative is a biomaterials company. We're over in Green Island, and we're taking agricultural byproducts and using our patented mushroom technology to turn it into these amazing biomaterials that can replace plastics like styrofoam. So before I tell you about that, I want to put it into the context of two themes, and that's time and materials. So all the stuff that we make everything in our lives out of, everything that we mine and grow and melt and weld and bond and form into all the stuff around us. So you'll hear a lot of people saying, that was a waste of time, or I'm going to throw this in the waste bin, I'm going to throw it away. But there is no away. Away is just the landfill on the other side of town. And this very concept of waste is a human invention. And I think it's the most dangerous human invention of all time. Because in nature, there's no waste. Everything is food for something else. There's no waste in nature. So I want to ask you a question to start off. How long does it take to make this little piece of styrofoam packaging? Well, if you're a plant manager in an expanded polystyrene, this stuff, expansion and molding facility, you might say, oh, my cycle time is 7 seconds apart. Yeah, well, okay, but really, it doesn't start there. It starts here. And really, it starts with plants and animals and maybe dinosaurs and about 65 million years ago. And then after it formed in the oil into this precious substance, we spent the most advanced technology, the most expensive technology on the planet to suck it out of all these nooks and crannies, transport it over long distances, and refine it finally into something like this. And where does it end up? Very quickly, it ends up here in the landfill, if we're lucky. A lot of times it doesn't make it there. It'll end up in our forests and fields and oceans. You've probably heard a lot about the Pacific Ocean gyre, where styrofoam will find its way into the ocean, and it really doesn't degrade, but it will break up into little tiny bits. And then those bits will get confused as krill and fish. And sea creatures, seabirds, like this poor bird, will end up eating it and dying. So we're literally poisoning our planet with these plastic materials. So this is a timeline to put that whole styrofoam life cycle into perspective. That brown line up here, it's a bit hard to read on here, but it starts with dynos, oil rig, tanker, refinery, expansion facility. That's the production phase, and that's the 65 million years. And then this light blue line on the end, that's the disposal phase. And a lot of people disagree whether it's going to last 10,000 years or hundreds of thousands of years or never biodegrade. Frankly, we're not sure because we haven't had this material around long enough to ever see it biodegrade. And what's missing there is the use phase. And that's because on this screen it's less than 1 pixel. So while this is actually doing its job, actually protecting your product and doing what it's supposed to do, even if you use this for 100 years as insulation in your building, it's only 1 pixel on this screen. And so this timeline is just, it's crazy to be using materials like styrofoam for the uses that we use them for. They're remarkable materials, but it just doesn't make any sense. So it's clear to us at Ecovative that to build a sustainable future, we need to build that sustainable future with sustainable materials. And to be truly sustainable, I would argue that these materials must be renewable materials. We're never going to reach 100% recycling rates, and even if we do, really what we're doing is downcycling. So it takes more energy to typically produce a material of weaker material properties, and you're downgrading that material as it gets recycled. So what are we going to use? Well, luckily, we live on the most amazing planet we've ever discovered, and we've got 50 million species on this planet, and all of them produce unique biomaterials. So I want to make an important point here. I don't think we should take endangered leopards and turn them into amazing fur coats. That's a terrible idea. But there's a lot of really smart ways that we can adapt to nature to meet our human needs. So what do we humans use to make renewable materials? Well, mostly we use plants. So this is made of wood, my shirt's made of cotton, and this cardboard box is made of trees. So how long does it take to make this cardboard box? Well, obviously it starts as trees. To get the nice long fibers that you need to make craft paper, you have to grow those trees for at least 15 years. And then once you grow them, you chop them down, pulp them up, use a lot of energy and some chemicals, and eventually you get this cardboard box, which is eventually recycled. So we're getting a heck of a lot better than styrofoam. But it still takes a really long time. So what else do humans use for renewable materials? Well, sometimes we use animals. My shoes are made of leather. This looks like it's coated in shellac, which comes from the lac beetle. What else do humans use for renewable materials? Well, lately we've been using bacteria to produce some pretty remarkable bioplastics. And this is not what Ecovative does, but I want to speak about it very quickly. So a lot of you have probably seen that Sun Chips bag that came out a little while ago that's super crinkly and loud and advertised in big bold letters, 100% compostable chip bag. Well, that's made out of a material called PLA, or polylactic acid. It's a biomaterial that performs very similarly to traditional plastics, but in the end, in theory anyways, you can compost it. So how long does it take to make this PLA? Well, It starts here at this plant in Iowa. Here in the U.S., this is a $350 million facility. It takes a lot of engineering, a lot of chemical processing to transform this bacterial goop into something you can eat chips out of. But really, it doesn't start here. It starts here on a cornfield. Because like us, that bacteria likes to eat corn. And so problem number one is that we're taking a food product or a feed product and turning it into material. So it's got a lot of the similar issues that we've been talking about as far as ethanol and turning food into fuel. So to grow that corn takes about 4 months. And then it takes about a week or two for the bacteria to transform it into polylactic acid, which is then formed into the bag. And I want to put my suggestions to the marketers of these chip bags, put this little disclaimer at the bottom and say, not really home compostable. So, you know, the bag got a lot of bad press because it was crinkly and loud, but the big problem that I see in it is that, you know, composting enthusiasts like myself with a really healthy, active home compost pile in my backyard, I'd put it in there, and 3 months later, dig up the chip bag, it looks the same. And these chip bags do meet the ASTM tests for composting. They'll break down under industrial composting facilities, but any reasonable backyard composting pile isn't going to get up to 160 or 180 degrees Fahrenheit that it really takes for these to break down. So there's some big problems there, and it can be dangerous to mislead people about the words compostable, because people lose faith in materials that truly are compostable and truly do work with nature's recycling system. So there's one more on here, and that's fungi, and that's what we're using at Ecovative to make these materials. So we're not actually using mushrooms, we're not using the fruiting bodies or the caps. What we're using is called mycelium, and this is a scanning electron microscope of this material right here. And what you can see is these little fibers, the mycelia, bonding together agricultural byproducts into this strong biocomposite material. Can I pass these around? Can I ask you to pass those around? You can check out what this feels like. So the beauty of this process is that instead of styrofoam, which is made of oil or natural gas, we can use feedstocks from all over the place, and so we can source locally. Here in the Northeast, we can use things like oat hulls. And if we set up manufacturing in the future in Texas, we can use things like cotton gin trash, or everything left over after they make my shirt. So this is another SEM photo. It's really cool because there's an oat hull in the bottom right, and you can see that mycelium growing and enveloping the oat hull. And so really what the mycelium is doing here is acting like a self-assembling plastic. It's a natural glue that fills in all the holes and all the gaps between these particles, bonding it together into a material. So how long does it take to make mycelium? Well, again, first it starts with agricultural waste, but we're not counting that, because this is a byproduct that's already being grown for some higher value use. Farmers are already collecting it and don't really have a market for it or a use for it. So to grow mycelium into this packaging part, it takes just 5 days, less than a week. So this next slide, this is a time lapse, and when I press go, I want you to watch these little white dots. That's the mycelium, and it's going to start to grow and spread and bond this material together. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. I'm not sure that worked. Here we go. So watch that white stuff spread. That's the mycelium. Bam! And in less than a week, it grows into this packaging part. And that's why we call these materials ultra-rapid renewables. So today, instead of this styrofoam part, you can get this eco-cradle part that performs about the same, costs about the same, and is far better for the environment. It's far less embodied energy, it's all renewable, and in the end, it works with nature's recycling system. It's truly home compostable. So when I'm done with this, I crumple it up and I use it as mulch in my vegetable garden. Or if I've got too much of it, I put it in my compost pile, and it really breaks down the way it would in the forest or on a farm. So this is a really remarkable material, and it can be applied to all sorts of things. Because we're a startup, we had to choose to focus on one thing, because if you try to do everything, you're never going to get anything done. So we started to to start with packaging that we call Eco Cradle. And today we're producing Eco Cradle for a lot of Fortune 500 companies. We would like to find more companies locally who will use this. And so if you have any ideas, please let me know. Right now we're selling to a lot of companies in the Midwest, like Steelcase for office furniture. Many of you might have their furniture. They're replacing thousands of expanded polypropylene corner blocks and molded packaging shapes with Eco Cradle. And we're just now doing a pilot with Dell. They're shipping their servers in mushroom packaging. So they're trusting really expensive server multi-packs to Eco Cradle packaging because it works. We've also got grants with NYSERDA, the EPA, the NSF, and the USDA to develop these materials for all sorts of other applications. Like home insulation, it's R3 per inch, and it's a Class A fire rating without adding any of those nasty, toxic, fire-retardant chemicals. You can literally hold a blowtorch up to this material and it doesn't burn, it just chars a little bit. It's really, really remarkable. We're also doing research into automotive applications. So all of your cars have about 30 pounds of foam in them, and there's been legislation proposed in Europe and in the States that says that cars have to be a certain percentage recyclables, and car companies are saying, we just don't know how to do this. And so we're proposing that this material can be a solution there. We also think it can be structural cores and everything from furniture to wind turbine blades and beyond. And we're doing some fun stuff like boogie boards. And hopefully maybe even some packaging for skateboards.
Sounds great.
So I just want to end with wrapping it back to this concept of time and time in the context of human history. So the Stone Age started about 2.5 million years ago. And then just 5,000 years ago, we found this great stuff called metal. You can make some really amazing things out of metal. And you know, many of us in this room, or certainly our parents, lived in a time without styrofoam. Plastics have only been around for about 200 years, and styrofoam has only been around for a little over 50 years. And so these materials at Ecovative we've been developing just for the past 4 years, and we're barely scratching the surface of what's possible. So if we're going to build a sustainable future here on planet Earth, we need to build that future with sustainable, renewable materials. We need to demand these materials and create legislation that demands these materials. And we think that this material is just one of many solutions for the future. Thank you.
Great. Sam, so you're looking at the issue from another side. You would like to deal locally. And you're saying, please, do you know anybody locally? How does a company which has a great idea, which would like to support other local businesses, jump that hurdle and get its word out, get people to know that you're there and what you offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're just now building a new manufacturing facility in Green Island, so we're expanding our manufacturing by 300%. And it's a little bit scary because we don't have customers lined up. So this will be online in about 6 months. And right now part of my job is finding these customers. And there's a lot of demand, a lot of interest out in California. There's a lot more manufacturing and a lot more interest and knowledge and passion for sustainable materials coming from the West Coast. And there's also a lot of companies saying, well, when are you opening up manufacturing in China? But we've chosen to start in New York State, and we're confident that we can fill this manufacturing capacity. We've got a couple local customers, but we're looking for more.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
You know, since you're making a packaging material, it must feel weird to fill a truck full of packaging material to send to somebody. I mean, so are there programs, you know, like which, you know, our manufacturing facility is literally on an old farm. Could you have a proprietary little spot where we grow our own packaging?
Yeah, that's absolutely what we're working towards. So because our feedstocks are so lightweight and so low value, and similarly our final materials, our final products are also lightweight and low value, it really makes sense to situate our manufacturing near a farm and near the end user. And the nice thing about this is that you don't need a huge expansion or refinery facility that you'd need for styrofoam. It's really a scalable technology, and so our vision for the future is lots of distributed small manufacturing sites.
Okay. Now, there's probably other questions, but I want to make sure that Thomas has time to talk. So, since we're talking about growing and farming, it's a beautiful segue to Thomas Christenfeld, the alleged farmer. And I heard something, first of all, I'm going to ask you before you even begin. When Sarah was talking about, well, the there are businesses which only support farmers who have someone coming along behind them so they know that. Did you kind of cringe?
Well, I do have people coming along behind me, but they got over the desire to be a farmer when they were about 3, so I don't think anyone directly in my family is coming along behind me at all.
And that's a
but,
challenge for a lot of farmers.
yes, though it is the case that we have actually placed a conservation easement on 120 acres of our land, so at the very least, that's one way I can ensure that the land will remain in farming. So even if I can't make my children do very much work on the farm, though I try occasionally, I can at least make sure that someone is farming it. So.
Right. Okay, so we want to make sure we can hear you. So if you would, talk to them both about your selling locally and your need to buy and finding it difficult to find it locally.
All right, well, my business also happens to be located on an old farm. Imagine that. It's actually been farmed since 1788 at least. We are in a still profoundly agricultural county. It's a dairy county, Washington County. It's a very small county with 50,000 people and a lot of cows. And let me just talk first about dairy, because dairy really does rely on a very local economy, because one of the things about farms is that they're really hard to move across the country. You cannot put that in the back of a truck and just take off. We really are literally rooted in the place where we exist. And for specific farming requires very specific needs, and so for Washington County, for their dairy farming, they have very specific needs in terms of feed suppliers, fertilizer suppliers, pesticide applicators, large animal vets, welders. They need an agricultural bank that understands how to give loans, or thinks it does anyway, to keep the farms alive. And this is actually, Washington County, because it still has a vibrant dairy farming economy, has a huge local support system of these other businesses that absolutely rely on the dairy farming, and the dairy farming in turn relies on them. And it has in fact become the case as dairy farming shrinks in the surrounding counties and in Vermont, that the dairy farms that exist there now actually rely on the local support economy in Washington County in order to survive. And if Washington County dairy farming goes under, we will take out dairy farming in multiple surrounding counties, because there will not be any veterinarians left to deal with the cows. There will not be feed suppliers. That said, I am obviously not a dairy farmer. In fact, according to my neighbors, I'm not a farmer at all. I'm a gardener. It's a very clear distinction. They always ask me how my garden is doing. I always want to offer that they could come and help me weed it if they like. So my needs overlap in some ways with theirs. I'm extremely fortunate, for instance, to have a guy on the other side of the hill who loves fixing machinery and building things. He's a very talented welder. He can build equipment for me. I show him a picture and he builds it. But obviously I have a number of other needs that can't really be met locally. There aren't a lot of specialized vegetable seed companies in the area. Nobody's producing the waxed cardboard boxes I need for CSA share distribution. I use biodegradable plastic mulch, which if you could make out of fungi would be just super. It's made in Italy, which sort of cuts into its sustainable nature a bit. So that's the challenge. Obviously, for me, selling locally is what I do. The whole buy local movement has really, I think, been led to a huge extent and obviously focused on food for obvious reasons. Fresh and local matters a great deal when you're talking about green beans. I don't even know why people buy those things in the grocery store that they claim are green beans. And so I've obviously benefited from that, and that's how I sell everything I sell is sold locally. It's sold directly to consumers, either at a farmer's market face-to-face or through our CSA, where we're dropping off weekly shares to certain shareholders. So I can make a very clear case for the power of buying locally, for how my customers are not only benefiting from a better product, I hope it's obvious that it's better anyway, but that they're also supporting the continuation of my farm, which is maintaining open space. They're helping my growing practices. I'm not certified organic, but I follow the rules. So I support, they have helped us to be able to place an easement, so we're maintaining open land in perpetuity. I hire local people at really lousy wages, it must be said, which are about commensurate with my own. But I do create jobs, and it would be nice if I could do the whole thing locally. There's certainly a whole movement in agriculture to, in fact, create the entire life cycle on the farm, have the cows that create the manure. I haven't gone that far, and obviously it would be tough for me to create waxed cardboard cartons on the farm. At least I haven't thought of a way to do that yet. But since I'm the one telling all my customers that they should buy from me and not the grocery store because local matters. I have to say, if I can, I buy locally. We have a great local hardware store whose prices are, slightly higher than if I go to Home Depot, but I always, if I can, choose to go down to Wiley's because it's a local family. They've been there for many generations. And also, I'm really not very competent, so I wave my arms around and give very vague descriptions, and they always know what I mean and have it. But it means something to me that when I'm waving my arms around and making strange noises, that it's Tim Wiley who's translating that into some kind of carriage bolt or whatever it is I think I'm talking about. And I mean, it helps that I'm in this very rooted community, and that there are still businesses that are still truly local. That's one of the reasons we chose to live in Washington County in the first place. I worry about how we actually maintain that. There's there's enormous development pressure. Putting a giant chip fab plant across the river is certainly going to place considerable strains on our vibrant local economy in ways that are hard to guess, but that will not necessarily be beneficial for the locals. So it's what I think about, and I try to be as local as I can, but obviously until Ecovative starts making my really cool biodegradable plastic mulch, I have to, when I have specific needs, I have to look elsewhere, and I can't move my business to Italy because they make my plastic mulch there. So it's very expensive. The cost of shipping that stuff to me, it's about 33% of the cost of the plastic mulch, so it ups my costs enormously. And this is a low-profit business. Being able to cut out shipping, if I could move to where they made all the stuff I need, would just make a huge, huge difference to the profitability. So.
Well, we have a few more minutes, and I'm sure everybody would love questions if you have any. Yes.
I might actually have a few.
Good.
One as a locavore, or hoping to be a locavore, buying fresh vegetables from Northeast Farms in the middle of winter is a bit of a trick. As a matter of fact, my daughter's opened up a Whole Foods store up in your area, and the base of customers is so small she'll wind up with a lot of spoilage trying to hang on to fresh things as it is. And then come winter, the farmer's market goes indoors, but, it becomes about the root vegetables. And so how do you compete with grocery stores with that issue? Because once you kind of lose somebody to the grocery store, they're in the store, and then they're going to pick up the other things they might have bought at my daughter's store. And so there's people don't want to make that extra effort to go to 2 and 3 stores to get everything. And then the other question I have for you, I'll give them to you both at once. What organizations do you feel, even if they have the word ag associated with them somehow, are more supportive of the local farming efforts and more sustainable agriculture as opposed to, farm factories and agriculture, larger agriculture? And what ones are more supportive, and which ones do you feel are kind of more in the camp of larger agriculture?
Well, I can answer the one about winter vegetables. There is actually increasingly, a lot of my friends are switching to winter production. Number one, because there is obviously this giant niche for local sustainable agriculture, just because a lot of people haven't done it before. They go to some considerable efforts to create sustainable local greens. It's a pretty energy-intensive effort to. No, they're actually putting heating cables in the ground. They're still growing in the dirt, but you have to have structures, you have to have heat, you have to have a number of other things. But it is definitely a growing business, but it's tough. And I think the hardest thing that I compete with is that people have, in the past 50 years, since that's only the time that it's existed at all, gotten very used to eating what they want when they want it. I go to the Glens Falls Farmers Market, people drive past fields to come there, they turn up in the beginning of June and ask if people have sweet corn. Because there's sweet corn in the market, and the corn is that high. It'd be lovely if everybody learned to eat with the seasons. That's not going to happen. There's a huge debate in my own family between me and my wife about whether you're allowed to buy tomatoes in the winter. It's largely a culinary issue for me, actually, though I think they might actually work as packing material. I don't know if you consider that. I think it's getting way easier to sell local stuff. There's just been such a huge movement that people come back in the spring, people wait eagerly. But we're still talking about a small percentage of the population. In terms of local groups, I suppose I could first give a little credit to the Agricultural Stewardship Association, though I work on the board. So they're directly working to keep agriculture sustainable. They don't actually deal with farming techniques, but they are focused on maintaining land base for agriculture, which is the first and most vital step in making sure we have any farming at all. If you don't think that's true, take a look at Clifton Park or Colony. If you just drive along Wolf Road, you are driving over some of the best agricultural land in America, or at least it was. Never coming back. So I guess the group that springs to mind on the other side that I've had some trouble, some qualms about is Farm Bureau, which they do some good work, but it's somewhat typified. There's an orchard over the hill run by the local head of Farm Bureau, who, speaking to in the paper, quoted basically complaining about all these small little hobby farms that don't really count. Agriculture is big guys, which seemed a little irritating at the time because my neighbor and I were farming together and spending thousands of dollars a year buying his apples to add to our fruit share for New York City CSA. So it seemed a little ungrateful. But they have to speak for their constituency, and their constituency is bigger farms. I would like to see them become a little more aware of the value of small-scale agriculture.
Jason,
I have a quick thing I just want to add, and excuse the cell phone, but it's relevant. So I'm going to read this list from our local CSA of what's available this year. So potatoes, carrots, onions, leeks, winter squash, celery, watermelon radish, Spanish radish, Chinese cabbage, hurricane, turnips, scarlet and golden ball turnips, rutabagas, celeriac, beets, daikon, kale, spinach, kamatsuna, Asian greens, collards, parsnips, kohlrabi, bok choy, fennel, and garlic. Through March, a variation of that. There's a couple things that farm just discussed with the owners a couple times. One of the major things that keep them from growing bigger, they have about 500 in their CSA, and helping others grow are laws around labor, recognizing small-scale farming differently than large-scale farming, access to funds, and depreciation laws around their equipment would really help their profile grow. I don't know if that matches what your experience has been, but I thought I'd just throw that out there real quickly, and not an expert at all, but I just wanted to.
And we are nearly out of time, but I want to make sure, if anybody, I know everybody was interested in what Sam had to say, but we rushed right past him to make sure Thomas had to talk. So, one last question if it's for Sam. And if not, then we'll take one last question, but I wanted to make sure. Yes.
You talked about it a little bit, but I just wanted you to expand a little bit, because we had talked about that before, how you wanted to do this decentralized, your vision for the future and decentralized manufacturing, if you could just speak to it a little bit more.
Sure. So one of the big research pushes for us right now is assessing different agricultural feedstocks and what material properties you can get out of it. And so you can do two things with that. One, you can find materials and recipes to produce packaging or any product using local feedstocks, and you can also tune the material properties. So depending on what you put into this, you can get different material properties and get, for packaging, different cushioning curves and different surface finishes. And so we're doing a lot of research getting agricultural waste from all over the country right now, trucked in, so that we can figure out those blends, and so that in the future we'll be ready to set up these plants all over.
All right. I want to thank everybody. It was a wonderful session. Everyone is here. Don't be shy to come down and say something. Yes, Kate.
Great. Just before everybody goes, I just wanted to make the announcement. We are obviously headed down to lunch. I'm sure you're hungry. The other group is already waiting on us. But just wanted to reiterate, for those of you who are able to participate today, because you're not partaking in the food provided for the Excellence Awards, please go and get your lunch or join us. We can provide materials at the back. So disappear if you need to go get something, but please come back so that you can definitely see what the awards are. Now you can go.
Awesome, guys.